What's up, everybody? This is FitSpaz Recovery. I'm your host, Paul, the producer, and I'm here to help get you fit, healthy, and stay sober. I have a lot to talk about because a lot has transpired over the last week, and I'm getting to this show a day late because since I got back from Nashville this weekend, where I was at the Beachbody Summit, I've managed to stay very busy the last 2 days, which is very good for me, and not necessarily doing business work, but staying busy with other things I had to do, general management things in my life and so forth. And where to begin? I had a wonderful time in Nashville. You get around people of a like mind doing fitness, and this is just an amazing community. It's not like just going to your regular local gym. It is really something unlike anything else I've ever seen before. On Saturday morning at 6 a.m., everyone got up and went to this street called Broadway, which was all closed off. I guess 28,000 people were there that morning, all working out for, I want to say, about an hour and 10 minutes. Every single celebrity trainer with the company got their own block of time, and people just en masse were doing these workouts, and it's an extraordinary sight. And the psychology and the adrenaline of being in a crowd like that made me push extremely hard. And so after pushing through all that exercise, I was so thoroughly drenched that it was unbelievable. I mean, like from head to toe, my underwear, everything, thoroughly drenched, and inspired by the enthusiasm everybody has. Everybody around me just doing the same thing, and such a huge mass of people. Like I said, it's extraordinary, and they put on an amazing show there, an amazing production. And Nashville's an amazing town. You walk down midday down the street during lunchtime, and there are all these different bars, and every one of them has some musician playing in there, and it's like a high caliber of musician. It's not like some amateur playing or something. So I noticed the community there, the bar for talent in Denver, in contrast, is much lower. So I find it very interesting. No wonder I think they call it the city of music, right? Or is that what they call it? I don't know. Had an amazing time there. I got to come out of my shell with some people a little bit, and I have ideas about what I want to do by the next time I go there. And it's about time to start kicking in on some of those goals. Where to talk from now on. I've been doing my workouts since I got home. I recommenced. Actually, I began doing 22-minute hardcore. I'm going to try and make it through all of that program, and one day at a time, okay? Because it's very challenging. I got home, and on Monday I did this first Cardio 1 routine, and I pushed freakishly hard. And it amazed me that I pretty much got through half the workout 11 minutes in and got every rep in and was just on point. I didn't do quite that well today, but I pushed really hard, and I did almost that well. But I mean, I just reached this point where it's like, that's it, I reached my limit. I have to break momentarily, or like form will break down and I won't be doing anything properly. Still, it made me feel very good. And let me talk about goals. I'm still reading this book by the author of Dilbert, the guy who makes this comic strip. It's How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big, Scott Adams. Some things in this book are interesting because I was reading something and I'm like, is this guy trying to motivate me with reverse psychology? Because he's talking about, I'm paraphrasing, but he says, like, well, if you were meant to do something and you've been thinking about it and saying you're going to do it for like 2 years, you probably would have done it already. So I don't think you're going to do it. And when I hear that, he might be right about some people, but when the way that strikes me personally, like, it makes me burn inside. I want to be like, F you, man. Because I can look at my life where I haven't always done what I was supposed to, and then all of a sudden I kicked in, and everything started changing when I started kicking in and doing certain things. So I think that's malarkey, and I wondered, is he just being sarcastic and trying to use this method of reverse psychology to bolster people into action? Because it does piss me off, and it makes me want to say, well, F you, I'm going to prove you wrong, dude. It's upsetting to me. And You know, I'll give you an example. I almost flunked out of the 7th grade at one point because I had the year is broken up into 4 quarters, and you get a midterm report card in between those 4 quarters. And in one of them, I had 4 Fs, a D, and a C. And I feel like it's my ego talking, but I'm like, what a joke, because I'm like one of those geniuses in the world, and I'm like, they say Einstein did poorly in math, and it's probably because he's bored in there. But so I freaked out, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna flunk, and that was really what was the fire underneath my tail. I was like, I can't flunk. So I recuperated grade wise, and I always knew I had it in me, and people around me were telling me I had it in me, and I got like about a little higher than a B average in junior high, and then in high school, and then for a story I won't get into now, maybe I'll get into it later, I was ostracized by a group of people, and I became like persona non grata with a lot of people. And that still holds true today, people who are still part of that conformist mindset, because high school is the conformist wet dream, and they can never break out of it, which is really sad. But that's not really my point. My point is that if that ostracizing of me didn't happen at that time, I think I might have continued going out with the same group of people, drinking and partying and neglecting my academics. But instead, what it really enabled me to do, which set the stage for many great years to come, was focus on academics. And I actually started getting straight A's in high school, which for me was totally unprecedented. Straight A's. I made the honor roll. I want to say my entire 11th grade, I had straight A's like the whole year or something, and which for me was extraordinary. People thought I was a screw up, and there were even people who were like, ha, screw up, and I'm like, look at those grades, sucker. And they were like, really? They had this totally different perception of me as not being able to do that. So what it enabled for the future was to get my grades up and get into a good university. I wound up going to Colorado State University and studying philosophy. If I hadn't been ostracized in high school, I wouldn't have been blessed with the circumstances, I think, to get my grades up to where I could go to college and have a real personal experience with people, adult friendships, young adult friendships that were amazing, good times, groups of people who accept you for who you are, and it was wonderful. But anyway, my point leading back to this book is, if you take what he says at face value, you could have looked at me when I was in junior high and said, this guy's a screw up, he'll never get his stuff together, and yet I did. And that's just one example of me coming around. And for years I was like, I want to play guitar. I never did. And then suddenly it popped when I was 21 and I saw a friend play my guitar and sing beautifully. I was like, I want to do that. And it was that distinct moment where an actual epiphany occurred, and I was like, bam, I want to do that. I started taking guitar lessons, and from that moment on, I got serious about the little bit that it takes every day. And let me tie this into goals, okay? That rings true for guitar. The grades I was getting, the schoolwork I was doing a little bit day by day, getting good at guitar, not all at once, but a little bit day by day. So this guy says, setting something like, I'm paraphrasing again, setting goals is for losers. And he means it's something like, if you say, here's this lofty goal I envision for the future, and that's it, I want that, you're setting yourself up perpetually, constantly, moment for moment, to fail, because every day you're waking up, you haven't achieved that goal, and so you're in this state of failure. So instead of focusing on the goal directly, his advice, which I think is good, I agree with this point he makes, is you have to keep the goal in mind, but don't focus on the goal per se. Focus on the systems and the little steps consistently, day by day, so that it parlays in a compounded way over time, so that eventually you reach that goal, but you reach that goal not focusing on it. You're focusing on the little things you have to do day to day, which I think is actually less overwhelming than looking at the goal and feeling that perpetual state of failure. Let me give you an example of that. as a metaphor, okay? I was telling you guys how, so it's like with the grades in school, day by day, it's really boring day by day. Life can seem mundane, but if we keep doing those little things, suddenly we look back at what was a tiny thing day by day, and we see this huge amount of progress made, which I think is fascinating, and it's so gratifying. It also helps reinforce those habits of consistency every day, that even though today you're not getting the reward, you still might wind up, you will wind up having that compound effect over time. So the physical metaphor is kind of like this. Getting through my workout today, when I think, oh my gosh, when you're doing so much activity for 22 minutes straight, and some people will be like, oh, it's not that long. That's not my point. The point is, it's very exhausting. And if I think I'm going to make it through these 20 minutes, it's overwhelming to me to think about the 22nd minute. All I can do is what's that little bit in front of me, this next rep. Same is true when I'm working out with weights. It's like one rep at a time I get through the workout, because when I think of it all at once, I get overwhelmed. And one last example was a couple weeks ago when I hiked up the Manitou Incline down by Colorado Springs, straight up the mountain, one stairway up the mountain. If I look at the top and I see how far I have to go, I get overwhelmed. And my mind plays tricks on me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't think I can do this. And in fact, I saw a lady, she definitely didn't make it up. She just turned back and gave up. And I should have been like, come on, lady, keep going. What you have to do to get up that, this is what I had to do because I was overwhelmed when I would see it up there in front of me, is just the step in front of me. The one step in front of me, and you keep doing the tiny little things, and you know that's your system. That's the metaphor for the system in place. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, 10 steps. Some dude said I stop every 20 steps and then rest and then keep going. And so it's that little system you have. You know it's leading you somewhere, but if you focus on that end goal, you can become overwhelmed and be like, oh my gosh, it's too far, I can't do it. But it's like the one step at a time gets you all the way there. And you can't, I mean, like, it's really hard to think about that long-term goal far up all the way at the end of the mountain, because it's overwhelming to my system. I have to kind of like put blinders on to that and just go, here's the step in front of me, here's the step in front of me. The same was true coming down, in some ways even more, because it was less direct and it was this meandering path all the way down, and it took so bloody long that I was like, I can't think about the time, I can't think about the distance, just keep going, keep talking to people, take these little steps in front of me, and eventually you get there. And that's the metaphor for life. And it's really good to actually do these physical challenges, because I think those kinds of things, as far as a challenge, it applies in the same way, but in a different context. When you're talking about a personal goal or a professional goal, it's a little bit of effort every day applied consistently over a long amount of time. It gets you somewhere. So you have the goal in mind, but you're not perpetually making yourself feel bad because day to day, I haven't reached my goal, I haven't reached my goal. That shouldn't be your focus. It just should just be the tiny steps in front of you that you know are leading you to that, but you're not so obsessed and focused with the goal that you feel like you're in a constant, perpetual state of failure. With regard to drug abuse, how this applies, I think, is if you're overly indulgent on a regular basis, the small steps, I've heard people say, just get through 5 minutes, just get through an hour, just get through the day. So you don't think about, I want to make it to a year sobriety. Oh, how can I do that? You take the small steps each day. And so it applies to many aspects of life, and it can't be underestimated. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I'll just reiterate that. So I don't just fall into line and become a great person after reading one book like this, but I get little things out of this book and that book, and it stimulates me emotionally. It stirs me up emotionally so that I'm like, okay, here I am. I take an assessment of where I am, and I need to take these little steps to move my life forward. And it starts turning the wheel a little bit. And sometimes if the wheel slows down, I start reading a book similar to this again, and I get rolling again. So I'm 14 minutes in. Let me jump in a little more. The timing's a little off because I was so busy the last couple of days. I couldn't do this show yesterday. I was trying to post a Facebook ad last night, and a special kind called a dark post, and that's not the point. The point is that I got so preoccupied with that I totally spaced out doing this. I shouldn't do that, because this is one of those consistent things I'm doing. I'm hoping that I have something meaningful to say, and over time more people will tune in. I want to thank Brett, actually. He's this gentleman from California who wrote me an amazing, long, articulate letter in appreciation of my appearance on Recovery Elevator, which is something that's still available. Last week's show has a link on FitSpaz.com, and you can also go to Recovery Elevator, and it says Paul in the second to last episode he's probably put out or something. And it was it was a good time, and I really appreciated getting that feedback. It's nice to get feedback. It's like fuel in my fire of the things I want to do. It motivates me to come here and keep doing this. And so with regard to substance abuse and many things I'm thinking about in my life, I still have my good routine. And I will say that I had a very exciting weekend. I was on some kind of natural high in Nashville, and even short on sleep, I felt really good, and my mood was really good. And I think the second to last night, I got 5 hours sleep before getting up to do that insane 6 a.m. workout. And it's like the least amount of sleep in the year almost, and the hardest workout of all, because it goes over an hour and you're just like, keep going, keep going. But so what I was going to say is, and then the following night, I got 3 hours sleep, and I got up what would be 2:30 Denver time to fly home at 6 a.m. from Nashville and arrive home in Denver at 7:45. Got some stuff done that morning, laundry and so forth, but I was going to say I couldn't keep my eyes open. I was sleepy, so I took a nap between noon and 3 o'clock, and I had to force myself to get up because I was just exhausted. And I knew if I kept going, I would sleep into the evening and then be up all night long, and I would be all screwed up. But anyway, my point I'm getting to in a very long-winded way is that how important sleep is, to have your sleep regular, because I could feel after I came home, probably the dopamine that the body puts out being in an exciting situation with new people, doing new exciting things. You come down off of a high, and I could feel myself sort of irritable and very foggy. And so it reiterates to me how important it is for me personally to stay regular with my sleep, to get a certain amount of sleep every night, to try and stick to that pattern time-wise, getting solid deep sleep, because it really is one of the things that helps keep me balanced. Another thing is I didn't have the chance to meditate when I was out there because it was just busy, go, go, go for 90% of the time. And so I came back and I had really good meditation sessions, and it's nice to fall back into it. Today my mind was very excited thinking about a lot of things, but I keep going through the routine, the rituals of the things I say to myself, and I mellow out, I calm out. So for me, this is another one of those pillars of stability I'm creating, spiritual cultivation and the development of relaxation and patience, but also with an idea of how I want to develop initiative in myself. And so one of the new things I've added, it's nice because I can always evolve it to be a little bit more, and you can always change it. That's the beauty. Every unique personality may have the things they want to work on, so they all find their way into my meditation routine. And in the meditation routine, I'm thinking a lot about motivation and initiative. And so this is part of it too. It's that I just can't expect myself to magically become motivated. I tell myself when I meditate that while I think about being motivated and having initiative, this is only part of the process. And so I have to complete this symbiotic circle process by, outside of meditation in my regular daily life, I actually have to have the habit of being motivated, do this, do this, do this, and get more in the habit of doing certain things, those little steps I was talking about, leading to goals that aren't overwhelming me by focusing on the goals, but having the little systems. It's I can't sit and think about something in meditation and just expect it to happen. I literally have to come out of it and be okay, I'm going to be motivated, and I'm going to make this thing a complete circle here with what I'm doing. Part of the circle is meditating and visualizing what I want, and the other part is actually doing. Without the doing, you're wasting your time. With reading a book like this, you're taking in a lot of good advice. You may be learning something, but if you don't put it into action, you'll get nowhere. So you need to create that system. Ding, ding, ding. I have had these other thoughts. So I was grouchy, and it's just like, okay, this is why I recognize very clearly that this is why I do these things, to keep myself even keel with everything, with my attitude. And so I went to visit a friend yesterday, a good friend I've known for quite a while. I've known him for about 16 years now, actually. And so we don't see each other often, but it's a friend that we often keep in touch. And so over time, even though we don't see each other, we kind of come together, and we're the same kind of personalities that can interact and have good dialogue and whatnot. And I was around him smoking pot, which was interesting, and it was worrisome for me, but I felt so I could understand, and I would even agree if someone said, oh, be careful, that's like a risk, you going and doing that. And yeah, it is. But so he was smoking it, and I smelled it, and I even took this little container that had pot in it and smelled it. Very, very foolish if I'm wanting to stay clean. But here's another part of it, okay? It's that I was also aware that without a tolerance, I was aware that if I smoke, I am going to become like vacant and non-present, and like not even able to interact with him at the moment, because I'm going to be so whacked out and baked. And there was no consideration from me smoking. I didn't feel that I was triggered and I was going to pick up the pipe, although I mentioned if I were to have a drink, like if I were to have a beer or two, suddenly, bam, that would be the next thing. And so I didn't do any of that. And my point being that I rarely expose myself to that kind of possibility. But this is a friend I wanted to go see. He's a very good person, very intellectual, very, I would say, just salt of the earth type of dude. Very cool. And I wanted to bring that up. I was around it and I was exposed to it yesterday, and I didn't fail, but I acknowledge that I need to avoid those types of situations. And I'm nervous because this fall I'll probably go back to Italy, and I'll be around a ton of Italians who are like offering me alcohol early in the morning when I walk down to the Piazza bar, and they'll be like, you're on holiday, and so you have to enjoy yourself. And that drinking is synonymous with enjoying yourself, but it doesn't have to be. And so I'm worried about going back there because I have quite a few friends who smoke as well. And so it feels like a little bit of a risk to me. So we'll see how it all plays out. I'm not going to drink. My plan is not to drink. My plan is not to smoke there. Last time I went back, I was like, I'm not smoking tobacco. And they roll all these hash joints with tobacco. And I'm like, no, thank you. I'm not smoking tobacco no matter what. So I would roll these toothpick-sized joints full of hash only. And it was good. And this other method that I shouldn't even teach people is I would take a nail on a flat like piece of cardboard and pop the nail up through the cardboard so that the nail would be poking up flat and it was stable and it would just stick straight up. Then you put like a gooey piece of hash on top of that and you light it on fire. And then when it's combusting, you blow out the smoke, and then you blow out the fire, and the smoke just keeps billowing off the hash while the hash burns. And so before you lose too much of that hash smoke, you put a cup over that and you trap the smoke in the cup, and then you take a straw and you suck the smoke out of the underside of the cup. And it's like, I shouldn't be teaching people how to get high on here, but I'm just telling you that's what we did. That's what I learned to do in Italy, because it's not like they have a bunch of pipes around or bongs or anything like that. You have to invent ways to get high, and that's how I was getting high there. It shows you the ingenuity born out of desperation to get wasted in a foreign land that does things in such a backwards way. I'm being silly now, and I shouldn't really go there, but so it's going to be interesting hanging out there, because I remember sitting on this ledge of the window at my grandparents' house and rolling or smoking and just sitting there and listening to music and being like, and looking up at the mountain. You can see cool stuff out the window there, and so I will I'll walk in and I'll be fine, sort of like I was yesterday going to see a friend and not smoking. I want to end with this though. That wasn't really helpful. I apologize. I'm sitting here teaching people a way to get high, and I'm just like explaining what I would do because I think it's interesting, but I don't think it serves a purpose in terms of helping people. If you are reeling or stinging and you're bummed out from a recent breakup, the loss of a loved one, maybe you lost your job, whatever it is that's bothering you, I really have come to believe that drinking and smoking as a means of trying to feel better about it may very well in the short run, be some kind of palliative relief for that disappointment or depression that you're experiencing. But in the long run, I think you're shortchanging yourself. When you finally get ready to get sober, you're going to be stinging emotionally a whole heck of a lot more because you decided to snuff those feelings out and stuff them in a box in your brain, and then you become like neurotic because I think you're not processing things emotionally necessarily the way that nature intended. And I know some people, there's some maybe there's some validity to a drug being used as a therapy, but when it becomes a crutch, like you're doing it all the time just to avoid emotions, like I know people have taken LSD or whatever to experiment with like having an emotional breakthrough with PTSD or something along those lines. That's distinctly different from you have a problem and you have to learn to cope with it in a sober state of mind. You're always setting yourself up for failure, in my opinion, when you're just shoving those feelings to the back and not dealing with them head on. And like I said, when you finally decide to sober up, your nerve endings, and you're going to be stinging in a lot more pain from doing that. So my advice, whether you decide to take it or not, that's okay, hope you do, is to just bravely deal with it head on. Because shoving it off, it becomes like this insidious, contorted ball of frustration. Also, getting high all the time, I think, interrupts the normal process when you sleep, like the way you may emotionally learn to cope. The part of sleeping that is assisting you dealing with life's issues and whatnot, you sort of convolute that system, that functioning. And is this scientific? No, I'm just speculating kind of philosophically. It seems like wisdom to me. It seems like common sense. I am going to go ahead and wrap this up though, because I'm reaching my half an hour. My daughter's coming to me shortly and I'll be posting this while she's here with me, but I wanted to get this recording out of the way before she comes so that I can give my full attention to her. I hope you are all well this week. I hope I've said something of value that is helpful to somebody. It's still my goal, even though I've said it, to get some other people on here to talk to directly. I'm just trying to figure out how to do that production-wise, whether I'm going to have people Skyping with me here or having people come into my house and talk to me directly. We'll see. Time will tell. And I'm going to do this. You'll be like, oh, who's this? He has a guest. I am going to do that, and I look forward to doing that. And this is FitSpaz Recovery. I'm Paul, the producer, and I hope if you want to give me feedback, send me a message to paul@fitspaz.com. Of course, if you want to see past episodes or have access to all of my various social media, you can find all of that by going to fitspaz.com. These are originally recorded as video, and then I take the audio that I record to the video and post them as a podcast. At the end of this one, you'll probably be hearing, you podcast listeners will probably be hearing some ambient noise from the video clips I'm playing of my experience in Nashville, which will mostly be like the super workout on Saturday. So bear with it. Hear that ambient noise and know that usually I know somebody's listening on the podcast, so I try not just to have random stuff. Wanted to explain what it is, so go to FitSpaz.com. I want to thank Kevin MacLeod for providing the music that I play in this show. You can, of course, find out more about that amazing composer by going to Incompetech.com. I'm Paul the producer, and it's my intent to be coming back to you next week for more talk about this, that, and the other thing. And in the meanwhile, I hope you have a good week. You decide to make systems and not focus too hard on your goals and all that jizzy jazz. That sounds a little bit perverse, but never mind. I'm going to end on that note. I'm going to end on that perverse note. Everybody have a good week. Peace.
One more time. Beast what? Beast up! Beast what? Beast up! Beast what? Beast up! Beast what? Beast up! Beast what? Beast up!
This is not a workout for people who are crazy Becky flexing, although they do great in it. But I built this workout for you to take care of your muscles, to restore your body, and you need a great workout at the same time. Here we go, both wide hands up, down, up, down, up. You go down.
Tired as hell, sweating. These people are nuts. Denver has the 420 rally, and this is a whole different kind of crazy at 6 a.m. in the morning.